Welcome to episode 189 of the CUInsight Experience. I'm Randy Smith, one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and this show is all about taking a deep dive with the leaders of the credit union movement that make it so great. And from time to time, we bring somebody along from outside the credit union movement, and today happens to be one of those shows. This episode first is brought to you by Motivosity. Motivosity is all about building amazing company cultures that help people be happier at work, and who doesn't want that? Through building recognition, connection, and community within your credit union. Your employees are more engaged, and in turn, your members are too. Check out Motivosity, Motivosity. Today, I'm having a conversation with John Hope Bryant. John is the founder, chairman, and chief executive officer of Operation Hope, the former vice chairman of the President's Advisory Council on Financial Literacy, and the author of the best-selling book, Financial Literacy for All, Disrupting Struggle, Advancing Financial Freedom, and Building a New American Middle Class. So let's jump right in. Welcome to the show, John.
My honor to be here with you.
Before we record, I was just mentioning that I listened to your book, Financial Literacy for All, on Audible, and I found myself nodding over and over again, thinking that mission and the voice that you were putting out there fits really well with that credit union movement mission of people helping people. So I was excited for this conversation.
Well, I'm glad that it rang authentic because, as you know, the credit union ethos comes from, that agrarian farmer, both in Europe, and I believe it was Germany, also in Canada, and in North America, traditional North America and the United States, from and up from nothing, communal spirit that combined with free enterprise and a version of capitalism, and it's closest thing to community-based economic development that you can get in an institutional fabric. And as one credit union executive told me when I was talking to him about what we were doing with banks, and he was feeling quite competitive, he said, yes, we don't need CRA. We don't need Community Reinvestment Act at credit unions. We are CRA.
It's built into us at the core. So for the people that don't know you, can you talk a little bit, they haven't read your book yet, but I'm sure they will after this, a little bit about your story. Where did the career start? How did it lead you to founding Operation Hope and financial literacy? How'd that become so important to you?
So I was born at the Good Samaritan Hospital in downtown Los Angeles in 1966. I was raised by a working class family. Mom and dad had the equivalent of a high school education. My mother went back to school at age 62 to receive her high school equivalency and march with cap and gown with 18-year-olds, which is really inspiring to me. I believe I put that in the book. Mom and dad built a little empire together based on hustle. My dad could make the money, but couldn't keep it. And Ambassador Andrew Young, who's one of my lifetime members, was on that balcony when Dr. King was assassinated in 1968, 2 years after I was born. He says that men and women fail for three reasons: arrogance, pride, and greed. And my daddy was too full of pride to ask my mother, who was a great saver and great investor. He was a great hustler, great income generator. But he confused making money with making money with a profit to start there. He thought cash flow was automatically profit. He confused making money with building wealth. And they'd actually built some wealth if they just held on to it. They owned a gas station. They owned a 8-unit apartment building. They owned their own home. They owned 2 or 3 businesses in addition to that in 1960s. And that 8-unit apartment building that they bought for $18,000 today would be worth about $6 million. We lost it. So my first lesson that I was too young to understand, was them getting a divorce over money. I just saw the domestic abuse. I just saw them fighting. And then I saw my mother leave. Then my mother stayed with what somebody I was told was a relative. She didn't want to make me nervous. It was just her girlfriend. And her girlfriend's boyfriend did not have, he was too prideful too. He didn't want to tell us that he couldn't take care of his family and ours at the same time. All it would have required, by the way, was a conversation about it, and my mother would have contributed. She was working. She was staying with them to save money to buy our own home. But he never said that. So he went to go make some extra money in addition to his job. And unfortunately, he did that selling drugs. It was low-level drugs. It was marijuana. But the drug dealers around the corner didn't appreciate that. So they followed him back to his house where we were staying, and they murdered him in front of me. That's in the book. So that was over money. And the guy had saved my life because I was swallowing my tongue. I'd fallen on this porch backwards and I was swallowing my tongue. He had saved my life. So this guy was like an icon to me. And I saw him murdered in front of me. I would think I was 6 or 7. And then my mother bought our first home in Compton, California. And a guy I befriended named George, who was very smart, had great grades, but did not have great parents. I had great parents. They just couldn't line up their business plan. My mother told me she loved me every day of my life. Well, nobody told George that. So George went around looking for self-esteem in the streets. And so George ended up hanging around my next door neighbor, who was a drug dealer named Tweet. And George got shot and killed with Tweet when I was 9 years old. So when you say what made me passionate about money issues, it was that all of these things were about money. Think about drug dealing. It's really about money. You being a gangster, it's about money. Being on a stripper pole at 3 a.m, that's about money. Cheating your taxes, it's about money. Making money on Wall Street, it's about money. So whether it's Main Street or Wall Street, why people going to work every day to a job that maybe they don't love, that's about money. Although I'm sure everybody going to work at a credit union loves it, by the way. So make a long story short, I went to school and there was a home economics class. And I think it was Colin P. Kelly Elementary School. He's changed his name to El Segundo Elementary School at some point. But anyway, banker comes in my classroom and teaches financial literacy. And I, at some point, asked this banker, he came once a week, so I had a chance to, initially it was we didn't want him there. He looked like you. He was tall, white, prosperous, had a suit on. It was really a beautiful suit. And we didn't want him there because every experience that my classmates had with a white person, male, was negative. It was a police officer or a detective. I didn't have any experiences at that point. I was neutral. And my white experiences were the teachers were white females who actually were very nice to me. And he'd come every once a week. And so we sort of had our hands crossed initially first week. Second week, we started a conversation. And he was like, you kids aren't so bad. And we're like, well, you're not such a bad guy for a white guy. So he started teaching us the language of money, financial literacy. And probably by the 4th week, I asked him, what do you do for a living? And how did you get rich legally? And I was dead serious because of my experience I just told you. This was like meeting a Martian. And he said, I'm a banker and I finance entrepreneurs. I mean, think about, a credit union executive that somebody meets for the first time. If you're a farmer or somebody in rural America or urban America. And people know what a credit union is. They have no concept, it doesn't even credit union. I know we understand unions. We understand credit.
I grew up in Metro Detroit. Everybody thought it had something to do with the auto workers union. So,
and by the way, the word credit comes from the Latin root word credito, which means credibility. Capital means capitas in Latin, which is knowledge in the head. So credit is not about money. Credit is about credibility. So you have credibility with a union of people who can provide trust, access to financial services at preferable arrangements because you're part of this family, credit unions. So anyway, this guy was unpacking. He explained credit unions. He explained banks. He explained Wall Street. He explained predatory lenders. He explained all that. And I started seeing my neighborhood in Technicolor for the first time. Check casher, payday loan lender, rent-to-own store, title lender, liquor store, pawn shop. Yep. And these were all 500 credit score neighborhood tenants. And I realized later that those didn't exist in a 700 credit score neighborhood. They'd be starved for customers. Anyway, that's why I became passionate about it. The story is all in the book, so I won't bore you with it. You listen to it. But you ask, why am I so passionate about it? Rainbows only follow storms. You cannot have a rainbow without a storm first. I became an entrepreneur because he said he financed entrepreneurs. He was a banker and financed entrepreneurs. When I asked him how they got rich legally. And I wanted to model. I wore my suit to school to model just like him. And it was the only suit I had. It was purple and crushed velvet and velour. And I got beat up every single day I wore it, but I didn't care. I had a little briefcase with my dreams in it. And I ended up selling mail order initially to my teachers, Stacey Adams shoes and jewelry. I had no inventory, but I had good gift for gab. And so they would order something, give me a deposit. I used the deposit to order the product. When the product showed up and I gave it to the teacher, then the rest of it was my profit. Yeah. I'm like, okay, now I'm a capitalist. And then I started the neighborhood candy house. A liquor store was selling candy, and he wouldn't do a joint venture with me. I didn't know what the word joint venture. I didn't know the phrase joint venture back.
Of course not. Or entrepreneur, probably, or all that. I mean, I know I wouldn't have.
But what I asked him to do was essentially a joint venture with me. I was like, look, I'm really good at, I understand my neighborhood. I understand my community. I've done what I call today market research. I am market research. I got cavities. And you should partner with me. I didn't say partner. You should work. Let me help you sell this candy, different candy in a different location. He just dismissed me. So I went and did my market research on his dime as a box boy. I quit once I figured out where he bought his products from and what a wholesale rate and resale rate was. All the stuff the banker was telling me came alive. And I set up the neighborhood candy house in my den, and within a very short period of time, I put the liquor store out of the candy business. And imagine what happened to my self-esteem and confidence right through the roof. So that never came back down to the ground, right? I mean, it became my calling card. Was something I think is really essential for success in life today is both confidence and self-esteem. The most important thing I would say is self-esteem of those two. All too often, poor people don't have self-esteem. And by the way, you can have money and still be poor. So the part of what this book does is to give you the confidence to begin rebuilding or building your self-esteem, because you know you're somebody. You're not dumb and you're not stupid. It's what you don't know that you don't know that's killing you, but you think you know. It's now time to learn the rules of this game and how to implement the rules in your own life. This is like a personal business plan. It's like Randy Smith, LLC.
Absolutely. I want to ask you something. The idea that you had some financial education at that young of an age is mind-boggling to me, because I just think of my own personal experience, and there was none going through middle school, high school, even into college. I fell victim to the get a free t-shirt for a credit card that they were giving college kids for absolutely no reason, right? And then you're like, Domino's, awesome. Didn't have a job. So that seems fairly unique to me, that experience that you had. Is that something that you see happening more today? I've been out of high school for many years.
No, it's not happening more. So here's the good news. There are, a dozen states, actually a little bit more than a dozen states, that have actually recently legislated the requirement for financial literacy classes. That's a very positive step in the right direction. And I am going to push the federal government on a bipartisan basis to pass what I call financial literacy for all legislation, so that we get financial literacy taught as a requirement in all schools, K through 12, funded by the federal government, because really the reason schools are not teaching it is a funding mechanism that I got President Bush to sign. I was the first person to get a U.S. president to make financial literacy the policy of the U.S. federal government, and that was under President George Bush. I didn't realize, as Charles Schwab and I was chairing the President's Advisory Council on Financial Literacy back then, that when we wrote a letter to these school superintendents, I think there were 14,000 of them, I was very idealistic. I figured if I was writing a letter on behalf of the President of the United States of America on White House letterhead, I would have some pull. And we got crickets back. I mean, nobody said a thing to us. They ignored us. And I was stunned. I was like, do we have the right address? Oh yeah, 1600 Pennsylvania is the only in the world, right? And they write a return address. And I realized that the school districts were viewing it as an unfunded mandate. And I'm sure the school superintendent was like, they get the letter, like shaking it to see in the envelope because there's a check attached.
Yeah, they're like, with what money, right?
The Department of Education does not set any policy on education. It's a funding mechanism agency. They fund priorities. And that's how they get schools. I mean, U.S. Department of Education is one big lesson in financial literacy. They incentivize you and penalize you based on money. Now, to get back to your question, even the states that have required it, and I applaud them, even those that have required it, you have people who are financially illiterate teaching financial literacy. Teachers with too much month at the end of their money are the wrong folks in most cases to teach. Now, that's not a judgment.
Absolutely not. No, but they weren't taught it either.
That's it. Like math, you can teach out of a book. I'm not convinced that the mechanism of financial literacy alone will do it. I think you need the inspiration and modeling of it. You need a banker, a business person, an accountant, or somebody who's in the trade, somebody who's in the machinery of free enterprise and capitalism to come in and translate this. And so that you can also say to that person as you're looking at them, I can be you. And this would be a great thing for the credit union movement, is to get this book and to take it across the industry, across the country, and really mark it up, underline it, make it dog-eared in every community, and put one in every library, in every public school, and go and teach this. We'll create a downloadable curriculum for the credit union leaders. They want to do it. They want to do Hope commitments in their neighborhoods to go teach this in schools. We'll help them do it for free on the curriculum side. And they take the book plus the curriculum, and they are the role model. And voila, there you go. Yep. So that is a missing piece for me. It was that banker, in this case, a credit union executive, was really the same thing as a financial professional, who brought this to life for me and made it real. I'm not sure if my teacher had taught me, it would have had the same impact. I certainly wouldn't have wore a suit because my teacher wore a suit.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say, you probably also didn't want the banker to be your PE teacher at the time either. So, it's like everybody has their own.
Everybody has their own lane.
All right. That's right. You mentioned what credit unions could do. If a CEO of a credit union is listening today, like, what would your first ask? They obviously have influence in their community. They know financial literacy probably better than average. What would your ask be of our listeners today?
Well, I think that they should all make a order that is, reasonable for their budget. You can do it through our nonprofit Operation Hope and get a tax deduction. Order the book for community leaders, for nonprofit leaders, for church leaders, for the school leaders, for your local libraries. Arm your employees with the book. And again, we can give you curriculum if they don't have it. And create a mapping around your credit union that is aligned with your membership to go teach this with your army of volunteers. So the first thing I do is just arm folks with the information. And if you don't have enough employees, or the people are right now, you think that you have other priorities, you can't mobilize the human capital, then empower the human capital in the community, who are different kinds of professionals, to go and teach on your behalf and record it. Record the results of that, have them report back. I'm all about outcomes, not just inputs on those experiences. And I would put those testimonials, those letters, those photos on my website. Take credit for teaching in your neighborhoods, in your schools, in your workplaces, depending where the credit union is operating from. You're going to have some great success stories that come out of that just very organically and very naturally, because no one's doing any of this. And It's going to be a feel good for your institution. It might turn into some more customers, by the way. Stamp your name inside the book. Stamp the credit union's contact details. Put a business card inside of every book, because you should be able to do well and do good at the same time. The next step would be the mobilization of the volunteers. The next step would be to make a Hope commitment. Operation Hope is the largest financial literacy coaching organization in America, but you don't need us per se. If you don't have a budget to hire a Hope coach and dedicated, or to scholarship individual Hope sessions for clients, that's fine. Just make a Hope commitment, cost you nothing, and we will help you organize in your local area. So we sort of meet you, Randy, at every level of this chain. And of course, at the highest level, they can request to become a member of the 1865 Project, to become officially aligned with Operation Hope. We'll do an MOU with them. They become a member, a paid member of Hope, and a partner in some cases to go do, or we go do the work together, or we do the work for you. So I don't want there to be any barriers of entry. I want to meet people where They are. We've worked with Alliant Credit Union. We've done some work with the Navy Credit Union. There's a number of credit unions that the U.S. Treasury Department, I forget what administration it was. You'd think that they would have a big budget of the U.S. Treasury Credit Union. They don't. But it's employee run, as I recall. But they, years ago, had a Hope Inside. They had allocated some money for a credit union for financial coaching. All the times we've done this, it's just because the money ran out, not because the results weren't there.
Let me ask you this. We'll link to all of that in the show notes so that people can get information. But you've been doing this for decades now. In my mind, I was just starting to think about this when you talked about sending the letter from Pennsylvania Avenue, and they're like, well, where's the money to do it? Where is the holdup? You've worked with a lot of financial institutions also on this. What's the biggest stumbling block for a credit union, a bank, to really commit to this? Is this one of these things where it's like, if you don't make it a strategic priority, it's not going to happen? If you don't measure it, you're not going to do it? Like, what have you run into as that hurdle?
Like most things that don't fit into a nice, neat box are required, like through compliance, or, the audit firm needs you to fill this stuff out, or the income and expense statement, or you can't get the money from the client unless you send out the statement. I mean, there are things that are required to run an institution. This is not one of them. Then you got to say, okay, is this community service? Is this community affairs? Is this in the foundation? Some people don't have a foundation. Or is this the business? I'd argue that this is a business case. And so that's another sort of mind twister. Like, wait a minute, what did John say? Operation Hope has gone from literally nothing, a $61,000 budget in 1992 and one employee, to 400 employees, 300 staffed offices. I think we have 1,100 satellite locations, 5,000 partners, $72 million a year budget. Most of that's private sector funded. Most of that, 85% of that, $72 million a year, $4.5 billion deployed back in the neighborhoods by raising credit scores, lowering debt, increasing savings so that institutions can say yes to credit provision. And now we have Hope Inside the workplace. All the Delta employees are our clients, and UPS employees, and blah, blah, blah. We have Hope Inside of schools, and we're doing kids accounts for the Atlanta public school system for every kindergarten kid, because that helps kids to go to college. As odd as that sounds, the numbers, the data now shows that a kid that has a bank account is 75% more likely of money in it to go and complete college. So to have a guy like me, to have a nonprofit, first of all, who's a guy like me? I'm an entrepreneur who controls for-profits and nonprofits. So everything about this is weird. Like, okay, John Bryant, is he a nonprofit leader? Well, he founded a nonprofit. Okay. So are we talking about this about as a philanthropic effort? Well, it depends. But he's also an entrepreneur and a business person who's running the balance sheet and income statement. Okay, but this is for-profit for him? No, it's not for-profit for him. It's for-profit for you. Okay, okay. Wait a minute. So who do I have run this for me? Well, who's your chief revenue officer? Who's your chief business development officer? Okay, but what do I tell them we're doing? And what's the business plan? Well, you got to make it part of your strategy to do well and do good. Well, that's not a loan. That's not a capital improvement. So this takes leadership. It takes vision, not a lot, but it does take vision, work, and leadership. Love is work. And I hate to say it, Randy, but some people are just lazy. They just don't. They don't want to. They want to come in at 9, leave at 5. Everybody leave alone.
Oh yeah, a friend of mine in Kenya, he's the CEO of the third largest SACCO there on the continent, and so SACCOs are their credit unions. They were doing financial literacy, like Zoom webinars over the pandemic, and getting a few thousand people a week on them. It was insane how the hunger for that education, right? And they've continued to do it since. I mean, it's just fantastic. But you mentioned you are a lifelong entrepreneur, which I appreciate. Also, you've worked with a lot of corporations, a lot of leaders. I'd like to just pick your brain a little bit here, just for a few minutes, on what you've lived and learned on the leadership side of things. What today, 2024, makes a great leader? I have a feeling age-wise, we grew up reading a lot of the same business books. Some of them maybe have held course, but there are quite a few that haven't. So today, in your opinion, what makes a great leader?
Well, I mean, you're getting into, this could be a whole other podcast for another hour, but I'll try to get it down to 5 minutes or less. It's a great question. First of all, a leader's not a manager. A leader's not a tactician. A leader is not a to-do list operator. I mean, a leader is somebody who takes initiative and who has at least their own vision. And courage is nothing. I've written 6 books, 3 are bestsellers, this one included. This is the biggest bestseller. Is number 1 still on online for economics and business management. And it came out as USA Today, number 1 nonfiction when it came out. I said in my second book, Love Leadership, that courage was nothing more than your faith reaching through your fear, displaying itself as action in your life. But capitalists are not courageous. Money is a coward. Like, money just wants to find the safest place to sit at the highest return. And if you're expecting capitalists and CEOs to be courageous and swashbuckling, you're going to be sorely disappointed. So my job has been to create a safe environment where people can step out of their comfort zones and be a bit more courageous, and I'll take the arrows for them. And so my biggest compliment, Randy, is when Fortune 500 CEOs call me a conscious on capitalism. And what they're essentially saying is, they're not saying I'm a better person than them. They're saying I'm doing things that they can't do and saying things that they may believe but aren't saying or don't believe they can say, running a publicly traded company. It happened this morning. I did CNBC Squawk Box talking about issues of the tax code and the taxation of corporations, and talking about whether medical debt should be on your credit report. And I said things in a way that I know that a lot of leaders believe, but may not feel they can say it themselves. And I found that most people are good people, but they're afraid that they do the wrong thing and get their head knocked off. And so people just tend to not do anything. And what I found is that there's, every now and then you'll have a Doug McMillon, CEO of Walmart, who's my co-partner and co-chair in Financial Literacy for All. And when I called him, and his Ed Bastian at Delta, and there's a CEO of Alliant who called me recently, the new CEO who wants to do some innovative stuff. And it was his outreach. Dennis Devine, I'll give him some credit. I didn't call him. He called me after having dinner together in Las Vegas at Formula One at a Visa dinner. He called me like, hey, we should do some stuff together. And he's following up on that. And I appreciate that. But anyway, in this particular example with Doug McMillon, I called him on Christmas Eve a few years ago and said, I think financial literacy should be a civil rights issue of this generation, the civil rights issue. And he's like, tell me more. And so we talked for a couple of minutes, and I said, we should create an organization. And he said, sure, I've already got my first member. And I said, what do you mean? So he was texting the CEO of then Disney at the time, as I was talking to him. And the CEO of Disney at the time said, yep, we're on board. And then he texted a couple other CEOs, and they were like, yeah. Before we got off the phone, he had 3 CEOs and himself of Fortune 500 companies. And then I started texting a couple people, and they were like, yep, we had 6 CEOs. And he said, John, we should launch this, but if we give it to our teams, they'll kill it. They'll noodle it to death. They'll legalize it to death. They'll HR it to death. They'll project manage it to death. He said, what we need to do is I'll draft the press release. Now, this is Doug McMillon now, the CEO of the largest company in the world to this day. He said, I'll write the press release myself. You check it out. We'll get these CEOs to say yes. They cannot take it to their folks. They gotta say yes themselves. You got 24 hours to say yes to it. We're going to issue it next week before anybody can catch it, and including his own team. And we issued a press release saying that these dozen CEOs were committed to financial literacy for all, embedding it in their business plan, 10-year commitment, resource it appropriate, make it a part of your value system. It's not prescriptive, not telling you what to do or how to do it, but you're saying at the CEO level, this is a priority, no different than healthcare was 70, 50 years ago. That's courage, Randy. That wasn't rocket science, but most people wouldn't have done that. And that's leadership. What he did was leadership. And I've seen enough of those kind of people to be inspired that the world won't blow itself up. And I'll leave you with this particular statistic. The book, The Tipping Point, on this point, Malcolm Gladwell proved that if 5% of role models, every community stabilizes. I mean, positive role models here. Not 90% of role models or 50 or 40 or 20, just 5. That's the power of positive energy and leadership and hope. So, Dr. King had 20% of the Black community support at his height, 20% of the white community support at his height. And most people were either sitting on their hands or against him. But he changed the world, Randy. He did it without firing a shot. And I think we can change the world again and do it without firing a shot. And we just need a few people listening to you to raise their hand and say, I'm in. That's it.
I remember hearing that line or that stat that it takes 5% of people. And I was like, that makes you start to feel like it is more doable, right? As we say, I think as we all have said, it doesn't seem like there's a lot that we agree on anymore. But if we can get 5% of people to agree on something. One question I was looking forward to asking you, because when I just kind of reading about your background and the different companies and the organizations that you've been a part of, we all have limited resources. So from a leadership perspective, like there's a lot of opportunities that you could chase down. But how do you make the decision that you're using not only money, but people, your time, all of that to really go where you can have the most impact? How about that?
I don't know the last time somebody's asked me that question. It's a really excellent question. I mean, I've got to be financially literate myself, right? I've got to have a budget, a balance sheet, an income statement. As I tell people, I'm not telling you, I can't guarantee that being positive is going to make you a success, but I guarantee that being negative is going to make you fail. I can't tell you that being financially literate is going to make you successful, but if you're financially illiterate, you will definitely fail at scale. And so, learning to respect the budget, learning to understand that you can't just do good. You've got to do well also. Even if you want to distribute money like a socialist, you got to first collect it like a capitalist. So if your outflow exceeds your inflow, then your overhead will be your downfall. I know this sounds very basic, but some folks miss these most basic messages. You've got to end every day, hopefully, with more than what you started out with, or at least the trajectory of that. And if you're spending more than you got coming in, that should be called an investment. Yeah, you're investing in human capital or in market share development, or even this activity we're talking about here. You should see it as something that will pay off at some time. So everything I'm doing is an investment, Randy. It's a bet I'm making. And I've managed things very tightly. Operation Hope has really succeeded. All my ventures have succeeded on momentum and leadership and acting like we're a startup, acting like we're going to go out of business every day. If you become Sears and bloated and you think that the world will come to you, you realize you're getting clocked by Amazon. You're a Blockbuster, you got clocked by Netflix. Remember Kodak booths? They were everywhere, and then they were not anywhere. Right?
And then they became coffee shops or ripped down.
So I'm co-chairing, as an example, the AI Ethics Council with Sam Altman. What the heck does that have to do with financial literacy and financial inclusion? Well, I think that every kid needs to have a financial literacy course and a technology and computer course before you graduate from high school. These are two essential ISs for our future, and we better get our hands around it. And AI is going to change everything. And I don't want to sit there and let it happen to me. I want it to happen to it. I think that Operation Hope it started out as an inspiration organization. Then it was sort of a machinery delivery organization. And then now it's infrastructure and systems and coaching. But at some point, it probably was going to be a data organization. It's a nonprofit now, Randy. We have this incredible data that nobody else has. And I think that's valuable, and somebody will pay us for it so we can go do good work in the world. I built Promise Homes Company, and I sold it in Christmas Eve 2021. And I had a liquidity event with that, and I'm still a shareholder, but my time in that, in my opinion, it sort of run its course as the owner. I have a different role there, and I have other joint ventures that are in different phases of growth. There's some things I'm growing, some things I'm participating in, some things I'm phasing out. But a corporation is a living, breathing organism. You have to nurture it and feed it and check its temperature every day.
I want to be respectful of your time, but I have to ask this one now because this is something I've struggled with as an entrepreneur and business owner but it's something you just said, that idea that some things you're growing, some things you're maybe managing, some things you're phasing out. I've struggled with the phasing out part. I think all ideas are great ones, maybe a little too optimistic. Anything for when it's time to phase out or kill an idea where, you've lived and learned and you don't go down that rabbit hole further and further, throwing good resources after bad? Have you learned anything from it where you do it better now? Because I still struggle with that. So
yeah, miss quick.
Miss quick. I like that.
In a relationship, relate this to a relationship. One of my mentors and friends is Quincy Jones, the great impresario of music. And Quincy Jones would say in a relationship, the only thing worse than being alone is wishing that you were. And and a lady came, he was dating this lady, and he had no interest in getting married again. At this point, he's 90 something now, but he was 80 then, and she was 28 or 30, whatever, there's interesting things happen in Hollywood, but she was young and she wanted to marry him. And he was like, we're just having fun and I'm paying for it. And you just enjoy it. And she showed up one day with embossed towels for his bathroom with their initials on it. And he's like, baby, I gotta get you married. And he went and found her a beautiful husband that wasn't him. And those people are married and having a beautiful life. Quincy Jones had to be very honest about what his calling was and where he was in his life and what wasn't his calling. I'll get into whether it was appropriate to be married, to be dating a 30 or 28, 30-year-old. That's his business. But anyway, I think that example relates to everything that if you put a flower in a flower pot and you can water that thing all day, it's appropriate, it's great to grow. You take that same flower and you put that flower with its roots on the concrete, well, you can water all day and all night. It's not going to grow on top of concrete, and it's going to die. So admit that when you've got a bad business plan or a bad approach, don't go faster and faster down the wrong road. Don't let your ego get in the way. Miss quick.
We're going full circle back to that ego and pride from the very beginning. So as we wrap this up, I have a few rapid fire questions that I always ask to end the show. Do you remember the best piece of advice you ever received and who gave it to you?
I remember the best piece of advice I gave myself.
What was that?
Get out of your own way. It's just stay out of your own way. My biggest asset, Randy, and my biggest liability is me. If I can just stay out of my own way, and not let my ego and my insecurity and my pride and my arrogance and my habits and my don't let the perfect become the death of the good. I mean, I can't tell you how important that is. Do something, be a PhD, not just a PhD. There's a lot of brilliant broke people because they thought that being brilliant and having more degrees than everybody else was enough. It's not. You got to hustle. That only in the dictionary does the word success come before the word work because it's alphabetical. Like hustle, have a little fear, have a little anxiety, have a lot of confidence, have a lot of faith. Get up in the morning early, work late, work hard, outrun the devil because the devil is a lazy punk. If you're a great worker, but you're not as smart as the person next to you, but if you're going to work twice as hard as them, ultimately compounding says you're going to win, they're going to lose. And I just outworked everybody, I've outread everybody, I've outstudied everybody. And you wake up one day and you're pretty dang on smart. You don't realize it because you've not done it because you didn't approach it from an arrogant perspective. You actually approach it from an insecurity and a paranoia perspective. You also have a little humility about it.
I think from listening to your book, you have a curiosity about you that's always been there too, though.
I'm nosy about everything.
Let me ask you this. You mentioned Quincy Jones. This is the random question. What's the greatest album of all time? That one you can still listen to from front to back.
Oh, I just love his greatest hits. I mean, look, Michael Jackson, people don't realize without Quincy Jones, there would be no Michael Jackson. At least not the Michael Jackson that we recognize. Because Michael had the confidence to go out on his own and do this creative stuff in his own way because of the creativity and freedom that Quincy provided for him, that him and Quincy ultimately, the same thing that gave him a creative freedom also irritated Michael. And ultimately, he got tired of Quincy too. Once he got confident, he wanted to go do his own thing, which is a child growing up. That's not abnormal. But I think one of Quincy's last albums was Soul Bossa Nostra, which is a unique kind of album for him, but it's a really compilation of, it's old and new, and it's got something in there for everybody. That's really worth listening to. But if you go listen to the artists that he had influence on, go back to some of the old school stuff, it's quite amazing, the breadth of his involvement. And I was so honored that him and others have taken an interest in me.
That's pretty cool. So let me ask you this. We will link to Financial Literacy for All, your book, maybe even give away a couple of copies of it. Any other books like that you've gifted over your lifetime or that you just think everybody should read? I see quite a few behind you. So.
Yeah, and I've got a closet of books that I give as gifts to people who are on their way up. It may surprise you. The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success by my friend Deepak Chopra. I like it because it's only 70 pages. For people who've got ADD, if you have short attention spans or you're not quite sure if spirituality, is for you, or people ask me, what's the one thing you can do to change your life? I say, try God. They say, well, what if I don't believe in God? Well, I said, well, that's okay. He believes in you. And I said, well, what if I don't think it's going to work? I said, well, God cannot possibly mismanage and screw up your life worse than you have. So give him a shot. If you don't want to go that far, you can just start with spirituality. And that's why I love the 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. It's very practical. And there's some basic rules in there. And they're like detached involvement. Detached involvement. You're completely involved with life, but you're detached from the outcome. It really is quite free. The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Read the book. Do not listen to that on audio. He drones on. It will drive you nuts like a hand on chalkboard. But the book is genius. Deepak Chopra has several books that are amazing. Dr. Scott Peck, The People of the Lie. If you're dealing with a lot of toxic energy around you, this book has to be 30 years old. People of the Lie. Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis is a 1940 book. I still give that out for those who are just, don't think that anything's real, that you can't see and touch and feel. The guy, C.S. Lewis, started out as a complete cynic on everything and became an enormous believer in the things he could not see, touch, and feel. I think it may surprise you that books I've all mentioned are not financial, non-business.
I love it. That's for sure. Last question for you. Any final thoughts you'd like to share? Or do you have I kind of asked if you had an ask of our listeners earlier in the show, but.
There's something I wrote after I published Financial Literacy for All. We stood up a website around it called the Business Plan for America. Anybody who donates some money to Operation Hope will get a book. Within 2 weeks now, you're going to start getting also a companion piece, which is a pamphlet where we've published with Andrew Young doing the forward, called The Business Plan for America. I'd ask people to go online, just search my name and The Business Plan for America, read that. And essentially it is a fact-based, non-emotional data. I like math because it doesn't have an opinion-based approach to this seemingly complicated issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I've not found one person to be able to refute it. Republican, Democrat, conservative, liberal, black, white, even the guy who walks around saying DE&I is horrible, the billionaire Bill Ackman, threw his hands up in a private debate with me at the Milken Conference and just said, I agree with John. He wouldn't say it publicly outside, but he said it inside the room with different leaders. So I would encourage people to read that. And I'll leave you with this thought. For people who are questioning, don't have fear today. You got to understand we're just going through a moment at this country. We're going through one huge colonic, and it'll be over soon. But nothing good comes easy. Love is work. We've got to realize we're better together. And we've been here before. The 1970s, a woman listening to this, a white woman with blonde hair, did not have the right to have a bank account.
That's right.
Or get a loan without her husband co-signing. Not in 1872, in 1972. And because of something that was created for blacks, which was affirmative action, which folks then had there was after Dr. King's assassination and Johnson's leaving office and not returning for office, Nixon won, but really on a pushback to those things, very much like we're seeing a pushback now. And affirmative action was created by Nixon, a Republican president, by the way. But no one wanted to give blacks access to the thing that he created. So white women actually took advantage of it. God bless their souls. And so women got freedom. All women got freedom in the 70s. My point of this is today, bring this all back to financial literacy. Today, women are a quarter of the GDP of this country. $6-7 trillion a year. And what would have happened, Randy, if we had denied women the right to participate fully in our economy and invited them, actually, not just a right, invited them into the full prospect of their own potential? We'd be an also-ran nation today. We'd be a second-tier economy. And we're just having the same conversation today in a different context. We're at a place now where we got to once again ask ourselves, who are we? We just need a software upgrade on America 3.0.
That is the perfect way to wrap this up, my friend. Thank you so much, John, for being here. We will link to everything we talked about in the show notes and let people find you in all those places. If people have additional questions, should they hit up your website? You on LinkedIn? What's your poison?
I'm pretty responsive. Within 2 weeks, you're going to see a Slack channel on all of my websites where you can actually talk to me in like a text communication. You'll be able to go to Slack and I'll respond and go back and forth when I have time personally. But for the moment, they can go to, I have 3 million followers on social media platforms. I respond to comments on all the platforms myself. Now, clearly I'm running companies, but when I have moments, I go on there and I respond personally. And I would encourage people to follow me there. You could also have a podcast myself called John Hope Bryant and Money and Wealth. Subscribe to that. Of course, get the book. Go to Hope at Hand app on your phone. You can go to the website, operationhope.org. You can call 888-388-HOPE is our toll-free number. So we sort of meet you where you are. You want phone, you want call center, you want website, you want, email.
Well, thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. And I hope our paths cross soon. Have a great day.
God bless you, Randy. My pleasure.
A few things before we go. Make sure to check out our sponsor, Motivosity, in the show notes. Motivosity is all about building amazing company cultures that help people be happier at work, and we are very grateful for their support, allowing us to have this much fun doing what we do. Please also subscribe to the CUInsight Experience on your favorite podcast player. We're on them all, Apple, Spotify. Pick your poison. And if you're looking for a book mentioned on the show, like John's, which I highly recommend picking up or downloading on Audible, a quick Google of the CUInsight Experience podcast book list, and the next read is on its way from Amazon. Last but certainly not least, I want to thank all of you for listening. Y'all rock, and I greatly appreciate each and every one of you. Be well, friends.